Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new episode of The Compromise with Alyssa Miller and Keenan Skelly. Join your hosts as they examine the latest cybersecurity news from various intersecting viewpoints. Where do our worlds collide, and where can we find common ground? It's all in The Compromise. These discussions are never boring, as we can always learn from each other's perspectives. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of The Compromise with me and Alyssa. We're going to have so much fun today. Some crazy things dropped in the last couple of days, actually, about the FTC getting $1 billion, $1 billion to use over the course of the next decade to actually create an entirely new agency dedicated to data privacy. It's called the Data Privacy Bureau. We have thoughts about this. We have a lot of feelings about this. You know, I'm going to head over to Alyssa and get her quick overview of, what this is. And then we're going to go at it. We're going to go at it because I know regulation. Yeah. We don't agree on regulation. So this is going to be fun.
This is where we hit the heat for sure. So yeah, Thursday, House Democrats dropped a little bit of a bomb when they unveiled this proposal. They're going to throw $1 billion of funding at the FTC over the next 10 years, which incidentally is like a 30% increase in spending for the FTC. So, okay, here we go. It's part of the overall $3.5 trillion reconciliation package that they've been working on. It's been getting all the press. And it's set for consideration in the House Energy and Commerce Committee this week. But like you said, it basically creates a new committee within the FTC that is focused on data privacy and security. Of course, as you can imagine, the other side of the aisle is not real thrilled with the idea. There's lots of complaints about everything from the amount of spending to lack of clarity just around what this committee would actually be responsible for, what they would do. Certainly, some interesting topics to go along with this. The same day that the House Democrats dropped this news, the Biden administration also announced their nomination for the new Federal Trade Commission commissioner. Alvaro Bedoya, who's a Georgetown professor, pretty well-known privacy advocate, was nominated that same day. So clearly the Biden administration and the Democratic are working together here, putting together something to start to try to address some level of consumer privacy and data protection. But, this kind of went not really widely reported on Thursday and Friday. There's only a few outlets that even made mention of it. So, Keenan, what is going on here?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts about the FTC in general. And as you know, I'm 100% down for regulation. Without regulation, we would not be able to have driver's license that allow people to, drive a car. Without regulation, we would not, have things that you cannot be if you're going to be a pilot of an airplane. Regulation done right is really important. But, when it comes to the FTC, I have so many mixed feelings on this because they don't exactly have a track record of doing data and privacy right. And that has to do with their internal structure, right? They have this entire world that's completely their own to shape and judge and adjudicate and that has not gone great for them in the past. Now, I'm totally here for some kind of agency that is actually doing this the right way when it comes to data and privacy. And I know you and I talked about data and privacy quite a bit. But honestly, I'm not sure the FTC is where that should be, especially as we're talking about, all of this funding that's gone to CISA recently. Maybe somebody else should have a look at, data and privacy. I don't know. I'm very confused, mostly just because I think sometimes the FTC can be very shady. And I think the fact that this legislation actually came out with 0.0 guidelines, rules, nothing. It's just like, hey, we're gonna throw them $1 billion. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be privacy. You'll love it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this proposal and there's not much there yet, right? I mean, literally the line it reads that this bureau is to accomplish the work of the commission related to unfair or deceptive practices relating to, wow, this is redundant even, relating to privacy, data security, identity theft, and data abuses. So it sounds great on the surface. But you brought up one of the things that I started questioning right away. Okay, so now we're throwing this inside of the FTC. But wait, we've got CISA out there already. If we look at, their charter, it's this broad space of cybersecurity. So now you start to wonder, where are we drawing the line? And what I see, I mean, I think the FTC has done a lot of good, right? I mean, you look at their charter and what they're supposed to be doing around, basically consumer protection and, competitive practices, all well and good. But I start to get nervous when we talk about the FTC getting their fingers this deep into the private sector and where this starts to become another case of yet another regulating body that's coming to the private sector, telling us how to do things without any clear interaction with the private sector. One of the things I like about CISA, at least under Chris Krebs, there was an effort to bring the private and public sector together to talking about how to accomplish these things. I'm not seeing that here. And so I'm thinking, all right, we throw, $1 billion over 10 years at this thing. I think it's great that we're finally addressing from a governmental perspective at the federal level, we're finally addressing consumer privacy and data issues. Mm-hmm. But
so I agree on that. But it's so interesting, the timing of this story when it came out. This past weekend, I was at CornCon out in Iowa, and a gentleman spoke there about his ordeal with the FTC, actually, and I found it absolutely fascinating. His name is Michael Doherty, and he has a whole book written on his issues with the FTC over the course of the last 10 years, where he basically outlines the internal structure of how the FTC operates with businesses. Like, they can just come in and investigate you. They can just come in and say, we don't agree with the evidence that you found, because it's a very self-enclosed kind of commission, right? So they don't have to reach out to the legislative branch. They don't have to reach out to, law enforcement to actually throw down issues or, charge people when it comes to corporations. Now, that sounds really scary when you think about their actual charter, from the 1970s, is to actually be able to help consumers and protect consumers and. But at the same time, if the only way they're doing that is by going after companies that they know are just going to go along and say, yeah, we did that, we'll pay the fine, because they don't want to deal with years and years of, litigation. That whole conversation, that whole chat, a talk that I heard really was mind blowing. So when I saw this article come out, all I could think of is, this agency has only had like 356, I think in their FY22 budget, they're looking for a little bit more, $356 million. And now we're looking to give $1 billion to an agency that has been under fire by a lot of organizations. And true, some of those are big business who are trying to do everything that they can to keep their businesses going and things of that nature. So we open this up now, let's say, and they've been staunch enforcers of the DCMA security research exemption. And I think we've talked about this a little bit too, as long as it doesn't violate the CFAA and things of that nature. When you go back and look at the kinds of things that they actually support, it's a lot of things that don't have teeth. It's very high-level policy-oriented without real actions on how they're going to do it. So this gets confusing to me as an agency. I personally, like I said, I love regulation. I think it's crucial, and especially when we talk about cybersecurity going forward, we need to have some things in place. Now, I know this is where she's going to get really mad at me. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm not even gonna throw you my opinion yet. We had one of our listeners spoke up on Twitter when we announced the topic this morning. Ben
Oh.
Brandt actually tweeted at us and he said, before we start legislating security control requirements, can we please all agree on adopting a unified risk management methodology? And he's not wrong.
No,
And this is the problem I see with what's driven the FTC to do a lot of what they do. So like you said, most of these regulations don't have teeth, so they kind of create the teeth.
Yep.
And here's another example, and it scares me to death, is this idea of we're going to legislate this broad-based across the entire industry. Every private sector business, regardless of who you are, have to meet the same nebulous controls maybe that the FTC is going to throw out here. And this is the problem when we start legislating things like this, is that everything, when it's at a federal level, it gets painted with a very broad brush. And anybody, including you, who knows me at all, knows I am the poster child for no one size fits all. And so if we're going to talk regulations and we're going to put the FTC in charge of this, I think that's great to a degree. Like, I don't know where else in the government this would land, right? I mean, this falls outside the purview of DHS, so I don't really think that CISA is the right place. Now, if CISA didn't sit under DHS, if it was his own entity, then maybe we could talk. But the fact of the matter is, sitting over in DHS, this is really outside their purview because we're not necessarily talking about homeland security issues here, or are we? We'll come back to that in a minute.
I was like,
so, I mean, data privacy, is it a homeland issue? But the bigger issue for me in all of this is that, again, what are they even going to be asking? What's going to result in a subpoena from the FTC? What is it going to mean? And, now you've got yet another governing body looking at us from a data security perspective that still doesn't really give any solid guidance to work with that's still tailorable. We have, NIST standards that go on and on and on for days with all their controls requirements are so, you think about NIST 853 and it's, I mean, that list of controls is so tight, it's insane. Yeah, the CSF, it looked like they were getting better. And then they started putting controls requirements or recommendations or whatever. They linked it to 853 and others, and it became equally prescriptive. And honestly, to do this in law, you have to be that prescriptive. And that's exactly why these regulations don't work.
I totally agree with that. When we talk about whether or not it should sit under CISA or something else, it immediately reminded me, and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, of the organization they want to set up kind of outside of DHS or outside of CISA that does, this breach verification stuff that we've been talking about. And the idea there is to take it out of not necessarily DHS's hands, but out of DHS's hands, but kind of put it somewhere where it's kind of safe, where they can have actual regulations that have very prescriptive this, and this, along with a couple of, but there are circumstances where this can happen and this can happen. When we start talking about how people are notified of getting a breach, when we start talking about the types of people who do that, and then you look at the FTC model of how they do that, it's totally, totally different than reality. So they have suspicions and people report to them, very much like a breach verification, report to them that, hey, we found data from this company out on the web somewhere, so we are going to investigate them. Okay. That's great, but investigate them how? Like, what information are you getting from inside the FTC that gives you enough authority to actually act on that? This is where I think when we flip back over to DHS or DHS supported, office is going to be a lot more powerful, because not only are they aware of the actual threats that are out there, they're also aware of all of the companies that they're dealing with. And frankly, they did not get a giant boost in funding for nothing. So I think that, FTC to me is shady. It feels shady. But I really, really think that if it was toned down for them, they might be able to handle some of this. But it's the shady part that has me on the fence here.
Yeah, I mean, Except my problem when you start talking about DHS taking this on is we really have to decide, is it really a homeland security issue? Right? I mean, if we think about this for a minute, homeland security implies, a certain level of, national defense, if you will, or something of that nature. When we're talking about the things that we want the FTC to be dealing with, consumers and, business practices, what I see is this falls way beyond just cybersecurity, right? I mean, this is now what we're talking about is Facebook, you did something shady, to use your term, because I like shady. Is Facebook doing something shady with, Cambridge Analytica, for instance? So where does the FTC land in that? And how does that, now, so within the FTC, they can do things there that I think are really outside the purview of DHS, right? I mean, how is DHS going to go in and have any authority in that situation to say, hey, we're going to come down on Facebook for doing this shady thing that exposed user data? They can't. The FTC can, because the FTC has the Consumer Protection Bureau. So
go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, this is why I don't know where else you would land it, and I'm not sure that I'll say point blank, I don't agree that CISA and DHS are the right place to drop this either.
So I think that it has to be a collaboration between the two. And the reason for this is, again, I'm going back to breach verification because it's a big deal. And we've talked about this on multiple shows. I think that if we're going to create something around that, the whole purpose of that is that corporations and companies are not honest and do not come forward when they have breached data. Okay, so that's a problem. If the FTC is getting their own information about bad data and privacy practices, to me, these two things should be kind of married in a similar kind of organization or very closely working together, because the things that DHS is going to hit upon when it comes to, breach verification and ensuring that that the things that are coming out of corporations are reported appropriately are the same kinds of things that the FTC is going to hit them for. So I think it needs to be a marriage of not necessarily not like legislation and execution, but policy and execution, and how those two things work together.
So this is, I sit and I struggle with this because it's a lot of government talking, right? It's a lot of, hey, and DHS, CISA, I get why they're parts of, they're part of the government. They're focused on that piece of it. They're focused on homeland security because that's what government is here to do. The FTC is focused on consumer protection along with, competitive protection and so forth. That's what they're there to do. But
the issue is that those have become so similar now. When we're talking about consumers being breached by any kind of company, having their information put out there, this does squarely fall within the FTC kind of guidelines, but it also falls within security of our homeland, our economy, our critical infrastructure, all of these things.
But where's the private sector in all this? See, this is what drives me nuts. We're going off and we're doing all these things, and we're going to give FTC $1 billion. Why don't we take that $1 billion and actually create a consortium of people in the private industry as well as the public sector and bring that together? And let's talk about how we actually start to address, consumer privacy. We're going to sit here and we're going to give the FTC all this money. We still don't have any decent consumer privacy laws. I mean, we've got CCPA, we've got other people doing their things. Federally, we got nothing. It's a joke, right? And so we're going to sit here and say, oh, we're holding you guys accountable via the FTC, and yet the FTC has no guidance, nothing to follow. So it's irritating to me that we've got, legislators focused on let's throw money at the problem. Let's give this new commissioner all this money to go do something cool and new, which I do have a lot of faith in this new nominee, and I think he'll probably get approved pretty easily. Mm-hmm. But, this becomes, Bedoya's baby, basically. It's like, here you go. You're going to create this thing, whatever it's going to be. And it just feels like a blank check to say, hey, do what you want, rather than having any type of coordinated effort here. And that's the thing. When I see, I'm not a conservative person typically. I fly pretty left of center, I guess, but I am somewhat fiscally conservative when it comes to stuff like this and just throwing money at problems without any plan. We can't do that if I'm running a business. And I'm not going to sit here and compare government to business because that's a foolish comparison. And anyone who wants to make that, I will fight you. I will fight you hard. But the fact of the matter is you can't do that in any shade of life. You can't just throw money at the problem. You've got to have a plan for where that money's going and how it's getting spent. And it's irritating to me the way that this gets dropped, the lack of any definition around it. And of course, they're doing that because they know there's no way it's going to pass. So now we're back to the diametrically opposed forces of our government and how that is holding up progress in every phase of anything, right? I mean, I'm gonna hold you right there because I feel like we're gonna trail on that argument a little bit longer. But we do have a question from the folks who are watching. So John Budrick II, hopefully I said that right. He says, "Oh, neat, conceptual and linguistic parallel RE private /gov privacy / something else." And this is really interesting. So when we talk about privacy, and we talk about it from our different points of view, right? From the entrepreneur to the Microsoft or the large companies of the world, the Boeings, down to mom and pop shops. There's a lot of interesting language. There's a lot of interesting things that have been thrown out there to kind of separate those from each other. But I don't think at this point, any of them actually get to the real problem of why data privacy is an issue. And it goes back to what you said before, which I do agree with. There is no federal standard. There is no GDPR. So this is where we get into something that should be managed by multiple agencies. I love interagency working groups. I love them. But honestly, right here. So somebody else popped in here. Jeff Allgood, exactly. Holding accountable to what? Where are the published guidelines? That's a great question. So in this partnership of how this should actually happen, there should be DHS, there should be NIST, there should be, the FTC, there should be bureaus for, private industry and, I can't think of the word right now. What's the word I'm looking for? You're the corporate one. What's the word? The corporate one, what, the enterprise? Here's the problem. I'm going to expand on Jeff's statement there a little bit more. Even beyond what are the guidelines, what are they actually trying to enforce? Are they there to come down on people, organizations and so forth who, don't take necessary precautions and they get breached? Are we there to enforce standards that are aimed at preventing breaches? Are they there to prevent organizations from doing shady crap that exposes consumer data or uses it in a way that's not consumer protective? Mm-hmm. See, this is all really gray, and it's the same, like you were saying with the FTC, this is where they get into trouble, is that they don't have, it's such a broad charter for what their responsibility is. I mean, I can justify any or all three of those as being part of consumer protection, and I can turn right around and justify why any or all three of those are not a part of consumer protection, save Absolutely. For maybe the third, because I think, organizations acting in ill, intent definitely falls under consumer protection. But those other pieces, is that something that the FTC should be enforcing? Is it something that we should be enforcing with other regulations? We don't have privacy regulation. Yep. So, this again, I'm just back to this feels like a stopgap because we can't pass any real legislation to create any type of law because we just know that the two sides, no matter what it is, I mean,
aren't going to agree on anything.
They're going to argue no matter what. It could be to classify the sky as blue, and they're going to argue back and forth about, whether or not the sky is blue.
I mean, clearly it's a light gray, Alyssa. Come on.
Here you are. But that's what they're doing. I mean, this is literally because the only thing that the Democrats can do right now is throw money at things because the only way they can do anything is through this budget reconciliation. So we'll just throw money. And we'll let all these agencies, and this has become the paradigm. It's been ongoing for a long time. I mean, we're 4 administrations deep into this being like the primary way that we're legislating. We're not using Congress anymore. We're legislating via executive orders and rulemaking and agency implications. That's it.
Although, okay, but to be fair, that is how that's supposed to happen. There are supposed to be executive orders that come out and say, we need a broad-based understanding of consumer privacy and data privacy in this country, and then send it to, legislators and the individual kind of organizations, whether it's FTC or DHS, to work out how that happens. Now, the problem in my mind is that the FTC is its own one-stop shop of, we decide if you violated, we decide what happens next. We decide whether or not we're going to drag you out in a 10-year, kind of thing, like the gentleman I spoke about earlier. They're so self-contained in their own importance that I feel like that's not possible, right?
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But what I really hope to see is, when we have people who are in the White House now, like Ann Norenberger and others, whose entire focus is to kind of take the reins on all of this and throw it back into something that makes sense. I think there's the ability to do that. But at the same time, with all of the organizations who have piecemeal parts of this, that's not going to be possible without, the White House stepping in and saying, okay, from our research, these are the 15 organizations who are touching this. You are now a commission to sit down and talk about how we do this right.
No, and I don't disagree. The problem is that's not what we're doing anymore, right? I mean, executive orders have become the way of the land for legislation. I can't pass legislation, so I'm going to produce an executive order. And we've seen it. We saw it in record numbers under our previous administration. The administration before that, did it in high numbers. The previous administration before that did it in record numbers. It's like I said, you go back now, the last 4 administrations, this is how we're doing it. And it's not the way that this stuff needs to be done. The problem is, though, I mean, I don't want to get into debating the problems in our political system, but it applies to this. We're not getting what you just mentioned. We're not getting that. Okay, the executive branch says we need this. Here's an executive order. Go create legislation to do this. And then let's go and get these agencies working together to enact it. That's how it's supposed to function. But what's happening now, and this is a perfect example, and it's one of the worst examples yet. Hey, and honestly, to be fair, we saw this with CISA too, right? I mean, the CISA funding in 2017 did the exact same thing. So anybody who wants to stand out there and say, okay, this administration's bad, this goes back to in history. It happened with CISA under the previous.
However, CISA actually did great with that funding and turned out to be an amazing organization. So I think it definitely comes down to, who you're giving the money to and when, right?
Right. And that comes down to who did you put in that place? And if it had been anyone other than Brian Krebs, would it have gone,
Chris? No, you did not. You did not.
I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry. Oh my God.
Chris, I do not represent that remark.
Sorry, Chris. I will, I'll go out later and I don't know. I'll go swimming in an ice bath or something. But no, I mean, if you hadn't put Chris Krebs in there, if you put anybody else, does it turn out the same way? Maybe not. But that's the thing. This shouldn't come to that type of decision. So we give Bedoya $1 billion to do this. What does he create? Does he create something great? Does he create something crappy? There's no way to control what gets created. There's no discussion point. It's basically his little, kingdom that he gets to build this thing. Right. And again, I think he'll do a great job. But he's also somebody coming from the educational sector of the world. He's very much an academic. And, does he even take into account the commercial side of this? What does private industry think of this? How does this impact, like you mentioned before, SMBs and so forth? This is not how we create effective privacy protection in this country. It's just not going to work this way.
My other concern with him in particular is not, again, I'm sure he's a wonderful guy and he's going to try to do everything that he can, but there are so many loopholes in the FTC right now and how things work that I feel like if you're going to give them $1 billion to do something, it should be to go back and, I was going to say something inappropriate, but Marco would yell at me later, to go back and unscrew that, right? I mean, seriously, there are a lot of issues with the way that they do business currently. And if $1 billion is going to go somewhere, okay, start there and maybe cut it down to a couple $100 million to focus on that so that we can aptly understand if they're even in the right place to be able to put something like this forward.
Yeah. I mean, and I can agree with that, right? I mean, that would be huge. But the problem is you fall into this really shady area really quick of what can you do? Now I'm back to the budget reconciliation thing again, because we're trying to do this with budget reconciliation. We're very, very limited. Even if, what would have even made me feel better about this? And maybe this is still in the intentions. I don't know. Hey, Big Joe, if you're listening, please, this is what I'd like to see. If we pass this and
we need you.
Mr. Biden, please, I'm begging you. If we pass this $1 billion thing and this goes out there as part of this huge package, great. I'm happy. Please follow it up with an executive order, at least, that provides some level of guidance and framework around what this money is going to be spent to do, how that's going to be shaped, because I cannot, to your point of this sort of free reign that the FTC has, being, judge and executioner, I don't like this just in their hands to decide, pretty much monolithically what they want to do with it. And that
I agree on that part of it, but I really think, I talked a little bit before about how the agencies have to work together. I think that's where the executive order really has the power to affect this, is to say, okay, we've got $1 billion. We're going to spread this across all of these agencies that have a foot in this game. And you guys have 90 days to get together and unscrew yourself, right? Oh, yeah. John's
not wrong, right? I mean,
well, no. I mean, we have another question. So John Budgewick, the second, he came back in and said, comparatively speaking, $1 billion is a drop in the bucket compared to some other agency budgets, isn't it? Well, that's true.
That's what I'm saying. He's not wrong. It is a drop in the bucket. My problem isn't the money. All right. My problem is not the dollar amount. I'm happy with the dollar amount. It's $1 billion over 10 years. Let's not lose sight of that either. This is not like $1 billion added to this package in 2022. No, this is $1 billion over this 10-year span. So it's $100 million a year. Yeah, that's not a lot of money. But what my issue is the way it's being spent. I mean, this is how we end up with $200 toilet seats, right? I mean,
this is how we end up with the CFAA.
Yes, exactly. These broad things that can be interpreted so many different ways. You look at the wording of how this particular bureau is being created, and it's equally as broad-based. It's just ripe for abuse by the FTC. It's ripe for abuse by those who file complaints with the FTC. And, that's where my problem lies. So, John, I 1000% agree with you. This is a drop in the bucket. I mean, it is for the FTC. As I said before, it's a 30% increase in their budget because their budget's about $359 million a year. And now we're giving them an extra $100 million a year. Okay, so big increase. But yeah, I mean, compared to overall agency budgets, I mean, this is a small amount. But yeah, so it's not about the amount of money. I know for those on the more conservative side of the fence, yes, that's what they're screaming about, because anything related to this $3.5 trillion package, they're yelling and screaming and stomping their feet about. That be what it may. I'm just worried that this is, again, money thrown at a problem without any directive on how that money should be spent. Seeing the FTC maybe sponsor a interagency working group to actually address this, I would love that. So if, to your point, that's what Big Joe comes down with. I'm going to keep calling him Big Joe, by the way.
Totally. Hashtag the compromise Big Joe.
Yes. I want to see it. Hashtag Big Joe and then tag Joe, because we got to get Joe on this show sometime. But
yeah, we've already started targeting you, Joe. We want to talk to you, not in a bad way, not in a creepy way. I mean, we're hackers, but we're not weird like that. But seriously, there's a lot of cool things that can happen in cybersecurity, and you need a little bit of push to make sure they happen in the right way.
So, Chris, if you're not totally insulted, But you're Brian, could you help us out there? I mean, you've got connections, right?
So, we're kind of getting close here. And I know we've talked about so many different facets of this, and, where it belongs, how it should be rolled out, who should be involved in it. And at the end of the day, we're getting to the decision point. We're getting to the compromise. So, Alyssa, I'm going to let you state your case. What is it that should be done with this and how?
So, you mentioned a lot of it, and we've talked about a lot of it. Like, I really think this idea of interagency collaboration, but I also want to see the private sector be a part of that. There's got to be something that draws that together. We saw CISA do it. We saw it happen. Mm-hmm. They did it with election security. Mm-hmm. And I'm not holding CISA up as this great, wonderful Oz that did everything right, because they didn't. Okay, I got lots of complaints too. But they did set certain precedent that I think we can leverage here. Take this money. Bedoya, if you're listening, sir, please take this money. Bring your agencies together across the federal government and involve the private sector and get a diverse group from the private sector. Please, God, don't just go shooting for,
Right. Every time it's Microsoft, Amazon, and one other, Google.
And don't forget Citibank, Bank of America. Right. Come on, let's, I get it. Those CEOs are powerful, but for God's sake, please, let's do right by the small and medium businesses that we're trying to encourage.
Yes. Yes.
So that's what I see. What about you?
So I'm slightly different than that. I totally believe in the shareholders, but I also believe, and I love legislation. I love it. It's my thing. I do believe that if we're going to enact something that involves $1 billion, I know it's not that much over 10 years, that it absolutely has to come from an executive order that identifies, this is the level of capability that they should have, and that they should have, and that they should have. And any money that goes towards that needs to be distributed appropriately. And I feel really strongly that now that we have cyber representation inside the White House, that this should not be as hard as it is. We have a lot of issues that need to be addressed in cybersecurity right now, and everybody's running to put their bill in to try to get support for it. And some of these are kind of running amok, and some of these are talking about exactly the same things from different perspectives. How about we get some reins on this whole cybersecurity thing, especially when it comes to this $1 trillion budget, this $1 trillion bill that was just passed? What are we doing with that as a whole? Why are there so many individual kind of, efforts happening without the coordination from the executive branch that there really has to be?
Yeah, I know. I hear it, but I just don't think without the private sector, I don't think.
Oh, no, I agree. And I agree with that part.
You talk about, we've got cybersecurity in the White House, but even look at the roots of that. Everything based in academia, everything based in federal operations and so forth.
Yeah.
We need people with a perspective. Excuse me, Republicans, you preach all the time about the small business owners. Maybe listen to us once in a while. Get us in there, please. Enough.
I represent that remark, and yes.
So there we go. We found the compromise.
Maybe the compromise, and here's just a crazy idea. Maybe the compromise is that group of folks that are at the White House kind of advising right now, maybe one of those people needs to be focused on the private sector only and identifying the right private sector people to bring into these conversations, instead of having people who have spent their whole life in government or spent their whole life in big business make these kind of decisions. There needs to be somebody at that level that actually understands the private sector well enough to support us.
I am here.
Compromise?
I'm here all day long.
Compromise?
Yes! Come on, we got it. Cool. Awesome. Well,
okay, great.
We got to wrap up, but you know what, everybody, really appreciate you joining in. Thank you for forgiving me. Chris Krebs, please. Somebody I'm sure has probably already told him. If not, somebody tweeted at him. I'll tweet at him and apologize grossly for that. But please do tell people about this show.
Yes.
If you think this is worthwhile, if you're having fun, this is literally show number 2. We got a lot to continue to build on.
Oh my gosh.
an exciting space. So come back. We're here every week. You know when to find us now. Come back. Tell your friends. Tell your neighbors. You don't have to hit some like or subscribe button because, you can. That would be great. But I think we're on YouTube. So, yes, please. But
more importantly, Big Joe. The compromise here. The compromise here is that you need somebody more focused on the private sector in your trio of kind of badass cybersecurity people.
Definitely. Awesome.
This has been great. Thank you guys for those who have listened and for those who are going to listen later. This has been another amazing episode of The Compromise.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Compromise with Alyssa Miller and Keenan Skelly. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.